Dr. Sean coming at you again from Gallagher Performance. And this is a follow-up into a video we just did last week about weak glutes and kind of dispelling the notion of weak glutes when in reality a lot of us are dealing with inhibited glutes. For more information on that, check out the video on our YouTube. But this short video is in response to some questions we received and some common misconceptions when it comes to assessing the squat, dealing with something called butt wink, and then also how to improve or identify ideal ankle motion as it relates to the squat. So to begin with, when it comes to assessing the squat and then also kind of identifying what's going on wrong in someone's squat mechanics, what's become increasingly popular in some movement screens, squat assessments, is that they recommend the individual staying with their feet straight ahead. Some will say maybe 5 to 7 degrees of toe outward. The problem with this scenario, problem with this setup is our hips aren't built for us to have our feet pointed straight ahead and squat. Reality is our hips and our femoroacetabular joints are sitting on an angle of about 30 degrees for most of us, about off center point. So that means our toe out is going to need to be about 30 degrees outward. And why this is relevant is unless that's there, and during the course of a squat, someone may find themselves binding up. In this case, if I hold my feet straight on and I'm instructed to squat, and I get to a point where my anatomy starts to run into each other, you may see the tendency for the feet to start to flare outward, which then from a movement assessment standpoint, if someone's starting there straight on and starts to rotate outward in their feet, then that will be interpreted as, by the provider or the trainer or strength coach, that there's something wrong with the foot and the ankle. And the reality is there may not be anything wrong with the foot and the ankle, and in response to the rotation of the hip, it's just simply trying to keep up with it and maintain a centrated position. So if my hip is out here at 30 degrees, yet I'm trying to have my feet straight on, you can see where we're going to run into a problem. So don't allow yourself to fall into that trap of having your feet straight on. Sometimes there needs to be a little bit of wiggle room. A good rule of thumb is maybe to start about 30 degrees. Being straight on isn't a very practical movement screen. It's not going to lend itself to a lot of usage in the general population. You may have some special populations of people with hip rotation, whether it's more inward or a little bit more outward, that's going to dictate where their feet need to be for them to squat comfortably. Now, building off of that, wanting to understand that that rotation here at the feet needs to be set up appropriately so that my knees and my hips can track appropriately as I squat down. A lot of movement screens and assessments will look for something called butt wink, where essentially as I squat down, I'm going to run into a point where my pelvis rocks under, or what they call posterior tilt. That's known as butt wink in the strength conditioning community. You see it a lot on YouTube and on Facebook and those things, but the reality is butt wink is normal. It's a normal physiological motion that should occur, and it occurs because once someone gets into the depth of squat, I only have about 110 to 120 degrees of hip flexion. If I'm trying to sit down to the ground and go basically ass to grass in my squat, that's greater than 100 to 120 degrees hip flexion, and so that range of motion that I'm running out of in my hip has to then come from my pelvis, and it'll impact my lumbar spine position. This, in an unloaded bodyweight squat, should be normal physiological motion. It should not be a problem. However, if there's a load, say from a barbell, now we have to make different considerations. But butt wink is normal. Sometimes you have to tweak it and avoid it depending on the athlete, the client that you're dealing with, to ensure that you're not putting any undue stress on the lumbar spine, the pelvis, or the hips. Likewise, you're not predisposing them to any undue risk of potential injury because of that range of motion. So, that said, one of the things that commonly people will look at to fix butt wing, to fix squat mechanics, is the foot and the ankle. And I alluded to this in our previous video dealing with weak glutes. If someone's ankle range of motion is not allowing them to have proper squat mechanics, then what we need to address is the motion at the ankle, specifically dorsiflexion. Sometimes you need to look at sometimes the control of pronation and supination, or how flat someone's foot is or how arched it is. But for the sake of this video, we won't go too in depth. We'll just talk dorsiflexion. Some people have been instructed at one point or another in their life that the toes and the knees should basically never kind of run into one another. So in this case, my knees should never go out over my toes as I squat, because that is bad for the knees and it's bad squat form. The reality is, if you look at normal squat mechanics, either from a developmental standpoint or what some people call the third world squat, you will see the knees coming out over the toes. You'll see this commonly in the Olympic lifting sports with the clean and jerk, with front squats. You'll see even positionally within certain sports. We need a positive shin angle as it relates to the foot. So meaning we need the ability to dorsiflex. You need the ability of the shin to translate forward, because that's from a sporting perspective, it's going to allow an athlete to generate more force. They can play lower, they can be more efficient, and because of that newfound ankle range of motion, they'll be able to tap into it and maximally display the power that they're able to generate through their hips and their knees. So that said, we want a drill to come into the picture, sometimes from a rehab standpoint or a performance standpoint, to help improve that ankle range of motion. Cal Dietz has developed something, I love it, it's called the ankle rocker. And simply in a single leg position, you will bend the knee forward, allowing it to come out over the toes and then back. Now in this position, can't see it because I have my shoes on, my toes are off of the ground. This is going to help also improve the intrinsic muscular support of our arches, so it will help strengthen and reinforce the arches of the foot while we're improving ankle range of motion in dorsiflexion and activating those muscles related to that range of motion, and help that translate into better power sports performance, but also into easier squat mechanics and allowing someone to achieve cleaner range of motion without necessarily running into their anatomy prematurely. So just to wrap up there real quick, straight on stance in the squat, it's a no-go. Try to use a little bit of outward rotation with the hips. If you look at sumo deadlifters, a lot of them stand real wide for a reason, and when they're real wide, their toes aren't toed in, they're toed out. So the more external rotation I get at my hip, I need it consequently at my foot. So the more externally rotated someone's going to be because of their hip structure, the more externally rotated their feet will be. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, because even if I am externally rotated to a big degree at both my hip and my foot, as long as I maintain a centrated position where now I'm avoiding medial knee collapse, I'm keeping everything nice and stacked, I'm not too outwardly rotated. Again, a cue that does not work well to have the knee rotated out. You just want it stacked, everything streamlined. Those will fall in line with one another, and you have to give it a little bit of wiggle room to allow someone to find where they're most comfortable at. Butt wink's normal. Game changes when there's load on the spine. And if you can improve and need to improve the ankle range of motion. It'll make a dramatic difference on squat mechanics, sports performance, and then from a rehab perspective, it cleans up a lot of stuff up the chain. Thanks for listening, guys. Again, leave your questions, comments here, and we'll continue to give these videos back to you. Thanks for listening.